Welcome to the Enhancing Clinical Practice and Outcome stream of SNOMED CT Expo 2022. My name is Nick Egerhaas, and I'm the Global Vendor Engagement Lead and Customer Relations Executive for the Middle East and Africa with SNOMED International, and I'll be moderating today's session. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Online attendees, please use the Q&A box to type your questions to the presenter. And on-site attendees, I'll be handing out a microphone if you have any questions. I'm now pleased to introduce Camilla Bæk from Lyniate, who will be presenting Unlock the Potential of Unstructured Clinical Data using AI and SNOMED CT. Camilla, please proceed.
Thank you. And really nice to see so many. Have been a lot of presentations, so I'm glad that you find some brain capacity to take in more. Thank you for the introduction. I hope I will enlighten you a little bit on how we can utilize the unstructured data and how we can actually unlock it in many cases, so we can use it in all the different cases we have out there for that we don't use it right now. So CareIndexing, that's the solution name. And I really see that as the key for unlocking the unstructured data. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just before we start, I want to set the stage, like what actually happens when you have to visit a doctor or physician. We all know if we need to go to any situation where we need to go and visit the doctor, he will need to describe why we are there, what he observes. So it might be in the symptoms that we have, prescribed medicine, medical history, clinical examination results, lab results, and so on. All this is captured in our electronic health record. And this information is very important because it often offers some clues around the pre-diagnostic process. However, this kind of data is also known as the most unstructured data type that we have in our EHR. And when I say unstructured, just so we all aligned, if you click next time, it's free text, most of it, and it's very hard to get a grasp around and get machines to understand that. That's a problem. Next slide, please. So it's 80% of all our data in our electronic health records that actually is unstructured or non-standardized, which means a lot of healthcare systems have a hard time to understand them, and we have a hard time sharing them, interpret them in any systems. So because it's so hard to share and reuse, that kind of data is often ignored when it comes to any secondary purposes, such as population health analytics. And that means a lot of good detailed information actually get lost. And 80% of all the data is actually a lot. So right now we have an enormous volume of this kind of data. Next slide, please. And there's a rapid growth of unstructured data. It's not just because we have collected a lot of unstructured right now, but we keep collecting it. The green one is indicating the structured data. It's also increasing, but definitely the unstructured, that's where we see the rapid growth is going crazy. So next slide, please. But why do we keep collecting this kind of data that we, one back, please. Why do we keep collecting this kind of data? As we know, it's hard to share, it's hard to reuse. The reality is this kind of data is very important for the care delivery. One click, please. There was a survey in 2009 that showed that all the physicians in this survey had a concern around losing the unique patient story with the transition to a point and click, the template-driven EHRs. Additionally, there was 94% of all the physicians that also mentioned that including the physician narrative as part of the patient medical records is very important to realizing and measuring the improved patient outcomes. So these numbers really indicate there's some good information kept or embedded in this unstructured text, but we don't use it. So how do we then start using it? Next slide, please. There's some challenges we for sure face when it comes to free text. My first sentence here says, free text is easily understood by humans. Maybe that's too optimistic as well. If we just start sharing notes from this conference, we know that might be tricky as well to understand. But machines struggles even more than we do. And some of the problems that the machines have when it comes to understanding this free text is, for example, the spelling and grammatical mistakes we do, which often occurs very often when it comes to time pressure. which unfortunately is there in the healthcare area. We also have some form variability, meaning we have different medical events appearing different ways. So for example, kidney failure versus failure of kidney. It's the same, but just two ways of describing it. And we need to include all these different ways of having the medical event represented within the free text. Abbreviations, that was just in the other presentation before this. Abbreviation really happens a lot, but it's hard to get a grasp around even for us as humans when we read it, but machines have a hard time too. Then there's also some problems regarding the medical event recognition, having machines to recognize, oh, this is a medical event, and these are just some extra words. So that's something here we need to have the machines learning. The same as having machines to do disambiguation. That's also challenging. And the last two here, so convoluted sentence constructs, something we see very often. We want to say as much as possible in very few words. And that's really challenging for the machines to learn. Language specific to a specific medical context. That could also be, for example, if we look at English, UK, US, and Australia, it's not all the medical events that is spelled the same way. Same just if we look at the different departments in a hospital, we might not use the same words, even though we try to describe the same. So those are some of the challenges that the machines are facing when it comes to trying to understand the free text. Next slide, please. So here's just an example. I really struggled to find an example that I was able to explain, because I can find a lot of complex examples, but it wouldn't be possible for me to explain like this is difficult because of. So here's that example. The first one click, please. Then we have an abbreviation where we have it could mean two things, but one click, please. Because of the context, we know what it actually means. So the context is key here to have that information built in. One click, please. We also have spelling mistakes. This is just one example. This is we will not say that's the clinical event itself, but that's the surrounding words. And even though it's the surrounding words, it still introduces some confusion. So we need to have that built in as well. One click, please. We also have some context around negation. So in this case, we have two nots that I've highlighted here. So the negation is key, that we don't start treating a patient for something they don't have. So we need to understand the context of how the medical event appears within the free text. One click, please. And then we have the form variability. So this is just one example out of many that these appears really often, that different ways of describing a medical event. So how do you overcome all these challenges? We have a solution called CareIndexing that utilizes NLP and SNOMED CT. One click, please. That we try to use for converting this unstructured data into structured output. So the three foundations, looks a little weird though over there, but that's okay. We have three building blocks of this product. We have the NLP part, natural language processing. To those of you that's not super familiar with that, it's a branch of artificial intelligence. We use SNOMED CT, and we also have a module called CareIndexing. The NLP solution, we have both machine learning and deep learning models built into our pipeline, due to the fact it depends on what we're trying to classify. So if we're trying to classify negation, we know that this model is best because we train it on a lot of data. So the pipe is a lot of different models depending on what we're looking for. We use those models to process and analyze the text and get into a point where we actually can start using that to find the codes for it. I just want to mention about the NLP solution. In our case, we have trained all the models on purely healthcare data. So discharge summaries, ICU-related reports, radiology reports, transcription notes, etc. So we know that the healthcare area have a very unique and complex vocabulary. So we need to make sure that our models suit that purpose for that kind of vocabulary. There's a lot of open source tools for NLP out there. That's fine. We cannot use them for healthcare. That's my opinion, because they are trained on regular books and it doesn't do the job when it comes to finding something that is really medical important. For the models here, we also had a collaboration with a Danish university, specifically Aalborg University. So we had this collaboration where we developed the models, and they have access to even more data. So they make sure that we trained tested our data, or models, sorry, tested our models against this large data set. So we have some kind of idea if we were good enough. And I'm saying good enough because we had a goal that we want to beat whatever that was in the scientific papers out there. And we reached that goal with the collaboration. So that was really nice. So that's the NLP part of it. Then we also use SNOMED CT. It's like a kind of a no-brainer, maybe for you that no SNOMED CT is the best for this one, because we have these characteristics of natural language in it. It also have a lot of synonyms, which we can really benefit from in terms of all these form variabilities we see, like different ways of describing a medical event. That's already in SNOMED. So we utilize that part bit. We also use SNOMED for going into this structured output by codifying all the medical events with pre-coordinated codes in this case. Last bit is a library called CareTerms, powered by Lyniate, a huge library of acronyms, synonyms, and abbreviations for a large, both the disorders, procedures, etc. So that is something that is really helping us in terms of improving the recognition in medical text or in text for finding these events. Next slide, please. So seeing is believing. So I actually embedded a video here so you can see what it is. Before we click start, just because it's actually quite quick, on one side here, we have the unstructured input, and the other side, we have the structured output. As soon as we paste in some text here, we can click process, and back we get all the disorders and procedures that is mentioned in the text. Might also be other things that are found in the text that have a SNOMED code, so we include that as well. But because of the hierarchy of SNOMED, we can filter a little bit on disorders and procedures in this case. It's not just finding the medical events, it's also the context we have built into it. So it's also the context around negation. So we have some color coding. 2 seconds, you will see it. But that's the color coding showing that if it's negated or not, or if there's a history of this. So if it's not present right now for the patient, but it's something that happened in the past, that's something we'll build in. Click play. Yes, the process, we get back here, you can actually see where it actually found that in the text. The gray indicates the history, red is negation, green is present for the patient. Besides the one we had there, we find even more with a SNOMED code, as well as we have a list of the SNOMED codes. Very quick, just so you got a feeling that it's possible, and we can definitely dive into, and I want to show more if you want to afterwards. Next slide, please. So right now I showed that UI. It's not like I admit it's not a pretty UI, but there's a reason behind that, because we don't see it as a lot of we don't want to put a lot of resource into the front end, because we care about the quality and the accuracy of the models. So we will rather provide this as an engine that could be plugged in any kind of situation where you need it. So the way it works, it is an API. One click, please. You will send your document through CareIndexing, it's processed and analyze the text, and back you get this structured output in a JSON response with all the SNOMED codes, the text span, and the context information. So you are in charge of what you want to do with this data. We provide the we provide the engine for you to process the text into a structured format. Next slide, please. As soon as we have converted it from this unstructured data to a structured output, we unlock a lot of possibilities for what we can use it for. This is just a list of some of them. I have 3 dots in the bottom because I don't see it's limited to this list. I definitely see more areas could gain from and benefit from this kind of process of your free text. But it could be improving the analytics. We actually have now a new dimension of data that have never been used in analytics before. That will be interesting to see how our analytics, for example, population health analytics, would show out after having the unstructured text built in. Optimizing the medical workflow, that could be another case. That could be, for example, if you want to get a full overview of a patient, sometimes some patients have a huge EHR, and it's super time consuming to read through all that text. So if you could build up a more historical overview with the important diseases and procedures based on the free text, that would be one thing to be optimized or could use to use this product. Could also be identifying patients for clinical trials, making sure that your inclusion and exclusion criteria are met when it comes to subject selection. And way more, I think we can keep brainstorming. You might have other ideas as well to where it could be used. Next slide, please. But one of the things that's also open a possibility when we have converted it into this structured output is that we can integrate it at terminology server. One click, please. A terminology server, we have one called Lyniate Health Term. And in a terminology server, you can have as many code sets as you like. That could be your locals, it could be the international standards, have them all in there and creating the mappings between them. One click, please. So you can use CareIndexing, one click, please, to feed in the SNOMED codes into the terminology server, and you can get out the code set, the codes that you need in your particular case. SNOMED is great in many cases, but we also have all these specialized terminologies and classifications that is really suitable for specific cases, and we need to use them in those cases. So that's why having an integration with the terminology server would be great in these cases. Next slide, please. So right now it works in English, which is super great. But as you might have guessed, I'm not a native English speaker. So of course, I'm curious to how do we get this into other languages? So we have now started, one click, please, to develop the Swedish version of this. So we have a collaboration with the university in Sweden to move this project forward. One click, please. But moving into a new language, that requires some development activities for sure. We have a good backpack of knowledge from the English project. And of course, we want to benefit from that and learn from that journey. But now we've started into the new phase with English or with Swedish text. Data collection, number one, as we have machine learning and deep learning models, there's a high requirement for a lot of data. So that will take a while to collect the data, and that's where we are right now. After that, we have started the testing as well, just because we want to move forward. But we have done a little bit of solution testing and some validation. And in this solution testing and validation, one click, please, we really benefit a lot from having such a well-maintained Swedish SNOMED extension, enriched with so many synonyms that is really easing the job for us for moving into a new language. Of course, we need some refinement at the end, having some feedback from clinicians. That's key to this, to make sure it's actually get adapted in good projects, as well as integration at the end. Yeah. Next slide, please. So all in all, having a solution like CareIndexing really helps the challenge we see with the unstructured data, moving it into a shareable format. And I believe we have a gold mine of information that is not leveraged to its full potential. And I'm super excited to see where CareIndexing can take all this, so we can learn more about our data. That was what I had. Any questions?
Thanks, Camilla. That was awesome. She'll take some questions now, and for those in the room, I'll hand around the microphone, and if you're online, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Questions?
So I noticed in the clinical, like the example, the timing is not being highlighted. For example, the very last one, 36 hours is completely gone. And that could be a critical part of the information for the patient and such. How do all want to go about, are you guys trying to find how to provide timing within?
Yes, love that question. So of course, this is like the first step. We need to see what's possible before we moved into like the bigger things. Could we find the numbers? Could we see how it's related to each other? So yeah, that's definitely on the pipe, on the roadmap to move in, to figure out these numbers. How do we then relate it to the different other medical events? Yeah, so that's right now it's, yeah, good question.
Anyone else? I have one.
Yeah.
Is the solution installed anywhere at the current moment? And what use cases does it solve in that particular install?
That's a great question. So right now it's in place in the US, in POC and for some, and in production for others. So it solves a lot the task in the US in terms of all the manual effort that is in manual coding, because now it suggests what kind of codes that should be used. So that is a place where it helps a lot, and it also. It's in testing with analytics, so it's really exciting to see. I haven't got the results yet, but yeah, hopefully I will learn more later.
No. No one else? Okay. With that, we're going to conclude the session. Thanks, Camilla. And online delegates, you can join another session through the event lobby. On-site folks, if you're playing our event game, scan the QR code at the door to capture your attendance. Thanks again.